Hey guys, Bill or William F. Iker here. Just starting my first video here about talking about books and what I'm doing and my writing and all that other stuff. Um, Possibly you were tuned in just a few minutes ago when I was trying to stream live on YouTube and I somehow got banned or blocked for inappropriate or copyrighted content. I'm not really sure what that was all about. So I'm gonna redo this here a little bit. Anyways, last weekend, David S. Sparks released to the world The Unfortunate Expiration of Mr. David S. Sparks. Came out on Kindle and paperback last week. It's a book that I had actually been working on off and on for about the last 10 years. I know it started about 10 years ago because I had a reference to Barack Obama being made president in it, or elected president in it, the original draft. Funny thing, actually, the original draft was about, it was actually started as a horror story called The Grabbing Hands, and it was a NaNoWriMo project that I started, and then kind of morphed into this whole other thing that turned into this sci-fi story. Most of pretty much all of the original stuff got cut out of it. There's a little bit of it that was the beginning that's kind of been moving to the middle that ties into some of the surveillance section of the book. But yeah, it's amazing what can happen when you're writing a book and how you can turn it into something brand new or completely different than what you imagined. I've since used also parts of The Grabbing Hands in some of my creepy little horror story or creepy little bedtime stories and stuff like that. But anyways, David S. Sparks or The Unfortunate Expiration of David S. Sparks is a book about a dystopian type future, kind of a speculative sci-fi book that goes over kind of what happens when we can't take care of ourselves anymore, when we've made the world so much health and healthcare and stuff like that, but then how do we feed each other, and then what about genetic engineering? And we try to make the world, like, we keep trying to control the world, and by doing it we end up making it uninhabitable for ourselves. It's a world where David Sparks wakes up and he is surrounded by nature and greenery and life and everything like that, but he soon learns that it's a world that is pretty much uninhabitable. So, people are living in cities on the sea, these technological kind of havens, but they're sequestered and quarantined kind of in these cities. And there's other people who are called organics who actually live in the old cities or back on land where they can, but they enjoy the life and nature and things like that, but at the expense of their health. So you see it like a diminished length of lifespan, for people there, a lot more disease and whatnot. But in order to do that, they're getting the ability to live a natural kind of life. So it's this kind of like fight between man versus nature, and I think it's a little bit different approach than a lot of other people take in dystopian fiction. But whether or not it's unique or not isn't really for me to say. I guess I haven't read every book out there, but I'm really happy with it, and so far the reviews and everybody who's been talking about it has been really happy with it too. So that makes me super happy, and I'm hoping that a lot more people read it and get more feedback on it and everything like that. But it's, like I said, it's available on Kindle now. It's available on paperback. I've got a quote on the top here from a author friend of mine who also runs a literary magazine. She calls it an intricate and evocative sci-fi triumph. That's pretty cool, man. Like, for someone to say that was awesome. And I didn't ask her to say it or anything like that. She just, that was her review. So, I got other feedback in the back. Oblivion meets transcendence, or a mental trip out session. So it's exciting, to come up with a new book and start getting positive feedback on it, especially from the early readers. Obviously, it's gone through a ton of iterations along the way, just like any book does. You can see I've got here my original draft in the binder with my actual notes, and I had some just playing around with concept art stuff, and you can see this is kind of what my Let's find a good page here to show you how that's what my markup looks like as I'm going through it. So what you see here is a very similar but different version of the book than what we ended up with. There was a version where sort of chapter titles we had data file names. There was another version where there was whole sections that were blacked out, like kind of a classified information, kind of black lined redacted text. It was pretty cool, but the problem was that when you read it, you didn't really know exactly what was going on, and because I would actually write it out and blackline sections that I thought were parts that would be blacklined by somebody. Conceptually, I really liked it, but again, it didn't really read as well as a story. So, you can see here. I did get closer to a final version, and generally when I get closer to a final version, what I do is I do something that not a lot of people do, but that I really recommend, which is printing out a proof copy and going through the whole book and reading it like a reader. You can see I marked it all up again. This was a pretty close to final version compared to what you saw in the green binder there, but in these versions here, what I like to do is go in and, when I'm writing it and it's on the screen, or even print it on paper and stuff like that, like I'm writing it and reading it as a writer, I'm editing as a writer, and it's a very different mind shift for me to switch to the whole concept of being a reader. I'm a huge reader. You can see my books over there. I've obviously have had tons more. This is the ones that I keep on my shelves. But I read a ton, and I want to make sure that when I write, it's something that people can read and they're going to be able to flow through pretty easily. So that's a big part of my process, and I'm actually doing that with another one of my books right now. The Trouble with Being God, my debut book, is being worked on for a 10th anniversary edition right now. Rereading it, rewriting the whole damn thing from not from scratch, but it's going to be kind of like a director's cut version, but hopefully better than or less controversial than what George Lucas did with his Star Wars. So no one's gonna change what they do or anything like that, but a little bit more understanding as to what happens. Like Greedo shoots first, Han shoots, kind of drama. So, but not enough people read that book anyways that anyone's really gonna notice. But once I get the new one out, it'll be awesome. Anyways, I did want to do a quick reading from this, from David S. Sparks, and at the end of the video and also in the comments, I will have a link. I'm doing a giveaway right now also of 5 copies of the Kindle edition through Amazon, so you can sign up for that following the link at the end. But anyways, the beginning first chapter here is titled "O Green World." Let me start. A prickling at the tip of David's nose stirred him, and the perfume of earthy grass, still damp from a recent shower, invaded his senses. Drops of water clung to thin blades of green, not yet dried by the throbbing sun. In the distance, a faint hum, barely audible over the breeze, grew progressively louder. He hunted the expanse of emerald turf before him. David rose to his feet. In every direction, as far as his eyes could see, there was nothing but vacant pasture. No trees, no buildings, no people. Nothing but an open, grassy arena rolling with hills. The buzzing amplified, a constant thrum against his eardrums, until, ultimately, he placed its source. 100 yards to David's left, one earthen mound rose at an angle harsher than the others, a near mountain birthed from the rolling hills. The source of the sound, it continued to swell, louder and louder, until no longer a hum nor a buzz, but an ear-splitting roar. David dashed towards the noise, the only hint of civilization in these damp fields. Up the loose rock of the innocuous mountain he scrambled, and, breaking its crest, he caught his first glimpse of the preservationist. Under normal circumstances, the sight of the man in the valley below would have terrified him, but, lost here in the wild, any fellow human was a welcome sight. Dressed in a pinstripe suit, professionally tailored but now tattered and frayed, the man stopped, stared at David, and grinned. David, however, overlooked this toothy smile. He was too focused on the chainsaw buzzing idly in the man's grip. The stranger opened his mouth and spoke, but the rattling of the chainsaw drowned it out. "I can't hear you," David yelled, pointing to his ear. The man killed the blades. "Good day, my friend," the man said over the slowing, rusty grind of the metal teeth. The man stood tall, at least 6.5 feet by David's estimate, but it wasn't the man's height that seized David's attention. Rather, his prominent forehead, a creased wall of loose flesh on top of an otherwise unremarkable face. The dusty gray bowler hat resting loosely on his head, propped in place by his ears, concealed the rest of his seemingly bald cranium. The man's only visible hair sprouted from his ears, wispy strands the same shade of cloudy gray as his hat. Still clutched in his meaty hands, the chainsaw wound to a full stop. Orange rust spots dotted the chainsaw's body. All traces of paint were worn from the handle long ago, victims of time and heavy handling. A glint of breaking sunlight reflected off the polished grip. Grungy with clumps of dirt and grease, its teeth held bits of white lodged intermittently between them. The bar supporting its steel fangs was muddy and brown, not with rust, but from the way it peeled and flaked with what appeared to be dried blood. "Are you going to kill me?" David asked. "Well, sir, that depends on who you might be," the man replied, his voice a combination of southern drawl and British cockney. I obviously can't do that accent very good, but I've got a person working on the audiobook who does it really freaking good. So, anyways, he goes on to say, "Are you progressive?" His finger played with the saw's throttle trigger, and he stepped forward, looking David in the eye. I asked, "Are you progressive? Do you have a chip?" David's mind searched for an answer. No, I'm not progressive." Sensing the man's apprehension, he added, "I don't have any chip, if that's what you're asking." The stranger lumbered toward David and excitedly slapped him on the back. "Then you're a friend! Well, shall we move on?" The man pointed in the direction David had just come from, back over the conspicuous hill marking the horizon. "Who are you?" David asked as they walked. "Those who know me call me Calvin. Those who fear me call me the Preservationist." "Well then," David hesitated, "I'm not sure what to call you." "I recommend Calvin. If you were to call me the Preservationist, I'd have to prune off that pretty head of yours." The man yanked the chainsaw's pull cord, accelerating its teeth to a frightful blur. "Where exactly are you going?" "To the sea," Calvin replied. "Both of us, of course. Not only me. It's not safe here. At least not for long visits." "What do you mean?" The man signaled toward the sky, waving his hand and buzzing the chainsaw in the air. "It's everywhere here. The air, the rain, the land, even the places we can't see. We spend too long here, we'll end up dead." And so the two walked on, trudging through the wet grass, silent beneath the leather soles of Calvin's loafers and squeaking with each step against the rubber of David's sneakers. Looking down at his clothes, he recognized them as the same he wore earlier in the day when he phoned his wife in California and heard the shouts of love from his 2 children in the background. Had that really been earlier today? If so, how did he come to be here? The blue of the sky suddenly seemed too blue. Electric. As he looked down at the grass, the blades snaked upwards, consuming his feet as they grew, reaching under the cuffs of his jeans, around his ankles and calves. Then they tugged as the roots began to retract, pulling him down into the muddy soil. Waist deep, he reached up and realized Calvin had walked too far ahead to save him. He thrust his hand down to the ground, bracing himself to keep from sinking any further into the recesses of the earth below. As his hand hit the ground, a rush of cool air blew along his arm. Openness hit his hand as it dropped below the comfort of his bedsheets, to the side of the bed and into the open expanse of his bedroom. Upon realizing the vulnerability his hand suffered, dangling there for any old monster to seize from its hiding space under the bed, his arm convulsed reflexively, returning the hand back to the safety and warmth beneath his layers of sheets and blankets. Shifting his body, he drifted back to sleep. Anyways, that's chapter 1 of The Unfortunate Expiration of David S. Sparks. I'll be back more with more videos, just talking more about the writing process and stuff like that. This one here is just, like I said, a quick overview of the new book and a little sample preview and a few little snippets and secrets from at the beginning there that I shared. If you want to enter to win a copy of the book on Kindle, you can do so at the link at the bottom of the video. I believe that's where you'll find it. And down in the description section, and that contest ends on February 23rd. So, yeah, well, any questions you have, I would love to do some actual live videos later on. That's what the plan of this was, but until YouTube unbans me, we'll just stick with videos like this. Leave your comments and questions below. All right? Thanks.